Hey everybody, my name is Ernesto Vasquez, and this is called Subnetting Part 2. So the first the first video that I did, where I talked about converting from decimal notation to binary. If you guys remember this page right here, I found it. Okay, so here we have a /24 network, and the /24 is the same thing as having this subnet mask right here, or this net mask right here. Before I get started, I just want to say good luck to everybody in your competition on Saturday. You know, do your best. Help each other out. Talk to each other. Yeah, this video is for cybertitans.org, and it's going to be posted there. So that's www.cybertitans.org. Okay, so let's continue from where we left off last time, or about 2 hours ago. Anyways, yeah. So we said that there's two ways to write a net mask. There's this way, the decimal form, and then there's this way, which is the /24. Okay, and we also talked about how a class A is the same thing as having 255 dot, instead of this being 255.255, it would be 255.0.0.0 for a class A, or a /8. Why? Because /8 means that 8 of these bits are turned on, and everything else after that would be a 0. Alright, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, and I'm sure this was supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There you go, that's the subnet. So this is the binary form of this, because 255 is all these place values added up. Okay? So let's see how. Okay, so CIDR notation. CIDR stands for classless interdomain routing. So it's right here. We just call it CIDR. So okay, let's talk about subnetting these guys up and breaking them up. Okay, so let's say you have this IP address 192.168.1.15. All right, and I think I broke this up into binary up here, and I broke up the subnet mask over here. All right, so let me copy this and paste this over. And this is a /24. Why? Because it's 255. That's 255. That's 255, and there's 24 ones. Okay, so I'm going to copy this guy. Oops. Let's see. Copy them. Put them right here, and here's my IP address. And then here's my net mask. I'm going to put this guy down here. I'm kind of gonna try to even them out a little bit. I should do it this way, like that. I should move this guy over. Yeah, that'll work. There we go. All right. So let's talk about how a Cisco router figures out what your network address is. Alright, and of course you know that your network address is the address that defines your network. Okay, that's where your network begins, and that's also one of the addresses that you don't give out to hosts. Okay, so once again, the addresses, so no matter how many hosts you are, 2 of the addresses don't get handed out. You only hand out the ones you do not hand out are the very first address, which is your network address. It's what defines your network, or the very first address that starts off your network. And you don't hand out the very last address, all right, which is your broadcast address, and that broadcasts to everybody in your network, right? And it's also the address, the very last address in the network. The address right after that would be the start of the next network. Okay, so that's how you would figure that out. So the way that a Cisco router figures this out, it's not by doing math, it's by using logic. So I'm going to go to google.com, and I'm going to type in truth tables. Okay, and this is what a Cisco router does to figure out what the network definition is for your network, using your IP address, any IP address, and the subnet mask, or the net mask, excuse me. So what it does is something called, let's put it down here for now, it's called AND and ing, I guess. Right? So it ands it. So basically, what that means is, so there's different types of statements. There is and statement. So if you could ignore the are statement, because these are 3 statements, let's just focus on statement 1 and statement 2. It could be any statement you want, like I like peanut butter, I like jelly, right? P would be I like peanut butter, Q would be I like jelly, right? In order for the statement to be true, both statements have to be true, and that's what and means, right? So if P is true and Q is true, then the whole thing is true. Remember, we're ignoring this whole column right here, this whole R column. We're just talking about P and Q. All right. So if P is true here and P is true here, then the whole thing is also true. Okay. If P is true but Q and Q is false, then the whole thing is false. Why? Because if P is true and Q has to be true in order for it to be true. Otherwise, it's all false. There's another kind of statement called an or statement. So or it means that it doesn't matter which one is true, as long as one of them is true, the whole thing is true. So like these two, this one is true or this one is true, so it's true. This one is true or this one is true, so this one is true. This one is true, but this one is false. But since it's an or, it could be either or, it doesn't matter. So here we have one true statement, so the whole thing is true. But since we're talking about and, that means that both have to be true in order for it to be true. So that's what a Cisco router does in order to figure out your network, what the network definition is, or what network this address is on. Like if they say, hey, here's an address, can you tell me what network this address is on? Right? So you want to know the network definition, right? So so you look at this statement, you look at the top and bottom. So here's my IP address and here's my net mask. So I'll just put it right here somewhere. IP address, and here is my net mask. Right? And your net mask again is what says how much of this address is the network and how much of this address is for hosts or for devices, right? So this one has 256 hosts, but since you don't use the first and the last address, it only has 254 usable host address. So again, know the difference between total host address and usable host address. Okay, so we're going to look at this down here. I'm just going to go down here, right down the line. Is this okay? So we see here that there's a 1 here. So a 1 is true and a 0 is false, right? So we have 1 and we compare it to the net mask. So we have 1 and 1, true and true, that makes true. The next one is true and true, that makes true. Oops, true. Right? And then the rest of these, there's a 0 up here, and because there's a 0 up there, that means it's false. So that means this whole thing is false. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's our first octet right there. And then let's do this one now. The first one is let me get it up here. First one's true. Next one's false because there's a 0. So both of them have to be true in order for everything to be true. So next one's true, next one's false, next one's true, and then the other 3 are false. 1, 2, 3. Dot. Let's move on to the next octet. And this is what your router does. Your router, your Cisco router, logically figures out your network using this method. So we're thinking like a machine right now. Sounds weird. Okay, so for this thing, you can tell that everything is going to be false except for this last one right here, which is true. So I'm just going to go ahead and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and an 8. Okay, dot. Move this guy forward a little bit. Alright, there we go. Alright, and then for the last one, you can tell that since there's all zeros on here, right, so it's false, 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 false. There's no 1 there, so it's false, 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 false. It's going to be nothing but zeros here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Alright, cool. So now that we have that, we turn this back into decimal. So this is in the 128th place, which is here. This one is in the 64th place. Then we have all these zeros that fall under the 32's place, the 16th. I don't know what happened to that. 16th place. It should be 8, 4, 2, and 1. Okay, so this is going to be 128 plus 64. So our address is 192 dot, because 128, right? The 128th place plus the 64 is 192, and everything else is 0. So the rest of these don't get used because it's turned. They're turned off. Okay. Now for this one, we have a 128. This one is not used. This one is. So 128 plus 32 plus that's 160. This is doesn't get used because it's right here. And then this last one that's turned on is the 8s. Right. So now we have 168 dot. And now we go to this one. And right here we see that everything is turned off except for this last one, which is in the ones place. So it's going to be a 1 dot. And this last one is a 0. Okay, so a 0 because every single one of these is turned off, so it's going to be a 0. So boom. So now they say, hey, what network is this address on? And then you say it's under this network. This is the very first address, which is not usable, but it's the network address, and it's 192.168.1.0 network. Okay. So what's the very last address before the next network? So it would be the very last number that's usable. So added all these up is 255. So your network address is, so this is called your network address. Why did this get erased? Huh. What the hell? 168, and then this guy was a 1, right? Yeah, a 1. There we go. That 1.0. That's your network, and your very last address is 192.168.1. And would be the very last 255. Okay, so this one's going to be your broadcast address, right? So you have the first address and the last address, which is 255. So how many hosts does this thing have? This thing has 254 usable hosts. Okay, so in the usable, how did I put H there? Usable hosts. So that means that from these 254 addresses, one of those is going to be the router, one of those is going to be your laptop, one of those is going to be your phone, one of those is going to be your Xbox, whatever, you know. It's going to get handed out to somebody through DHCP if you have it set up that way. If you have DHCP set up, which pretty much every router comes standard set up with DHCP, which you can change. Okay. Okay. So this is, so you have a /24. You have a /16 and a /8. Now what's easy about these addresses is that whenever you get a /8, the subnet mask is going to be 255.0.0.0, correct? Right, because why is it that? Well, it's 255 because /8 means there's only the first 8 bits are turned on and everything else is off. So it's going to be 255.0.0.0. So it's easy to figure out, you know, how much is, like, you're going to see that all of these are true, and no matter what the address is after this, everything else is going to be false after this, right? Because they're all going to be zeros after this, right? From here to here, it's going to be all zeros, right? So pretty much, let's say if this address was a class B, let's say, let's just pretend if this was a /8, let's say, you know, you could tell them, well, the network address is going to be 192.0.0.0. Because, you know, we just did the ANDing, but we did it really fast. You know, there's nothing to think. Okay, and then class A. I'm not sorry. I'm saying class B, but I meant class A because it's a /8. But it's the same thing for a class B, because a class B is going to be a /16, which means that 16 of these are going to be turned on. So that's the first 2 octets. So that means the subnet mask is going to be 255.255.0.0, right? So what network would this be? This would be the 192.168.0.0 network, right? If this was a /16. But what happens if you get a funky slash, right? Like a funky network. Let's say you get a /20. Well, I did 27 when I was teaching you guys this in class, or, you know, for those of you that were in class earlier, because I didn't get to finish this, that's why I'm doing the video over again. I used 27. I'm going to use it again. You could try with other numbers, 26 or 29 or 30. We talked about, like, if it's a slash 30, right, you're only going to have 4 total hosts, but only 2 of those hosts are usable hosts, right? So the first one will be your broadcast. Your first one would be your network definition, and your last one would be your broadcast. So like a slash 30 would be used for a point-to-point connection, let's say, right? We talked about that during class. So let's use slash 27, right? Let's pretend we have an address, and we have a slash 27, okay? So let's go through this, okay? So how many of these are turned on? 27 of these are turned on, right? So we know this is 8 first octet, so 8 bits or a byte. And remember that the whole thing is a 32-bit long address because each one of these is a bit. I think we went over this in the last video also. Okay, yeah, we should have. So 8, 16, 24, right? So right here we have 24. Right here we have 25, 26, 27, right? So we just turned this into a slash 27 network, right? So 255.255.255. So let's change this guy. What is this? Let's see. We have the 128th place, we have the 64th place, and we have the 32th place, right? So we're just gonna put this into the 128th place. Let's do this real quick. Oh, I already did it down here. 1110000. Oh, I did it already. Okay, cool. So through the magic of through editing, just kidding. So we have 128 plus 64 plus 32. That's 224. Okay. So this last number is going to be 224. So here's your subnet mask, right? So a slash 27 network is going to have a net mask. I keep saying subnet, but I mean to say net mask. Okay, sorry about that. It's going to have a net mask of 255.255.255.224. Okay, so what does that mean? What do I do with this? Okay, let's do something with this. All right, so we have the same address up here, right? We should anyways. Yeah, and a bunch of zeros and ones, zeros and ones. So we have the same address right here as the IP address, but now our net mask is now a .224. So in binary, it looks like this. So let's turn that into this. So let me just copy that guy. Let's just do it this way. I'm being lazy here, but yeah. So we've got a 1 there, and a 1 there. Right. So here's our new equation right here. Okay. So all of this is going to remain the same. Right. This is going to remain the same. This is going to remain the same. This guy's going to change though. Okay, so let's take a look at the new net mask, and it's gonna be the same thing, I think. Let's see. I borrowed 3 bits from the last octet. So the first one is gonna be false. Go back. Maybe false, false, false. Why I keep putting 1? See, don't do that. If it's false, it's a 0. If it's true, it's a 1. So we're going to have false, 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 false. Huh. So it's going to be the same. Yeah, it's going to be the same thing. False, 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 false. Because false and false is false. False, false, false. It's going to be the same damn thing. Let me choose another address. I don't want it to be the exact same scenario. Let's make this address a 44. How about a 44? Okay. Let's try that real quick. Oops, this is supposed to be the subnet mask, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This guy is the guy that changes. Okay, let's try that. So 44, 128 is too much. So 128 is too much, so that gives a 0. And this gives a 0. 32 gets a 1. How much do we need for 44? After that, let's see. We need 12 after that. Okay, so 16 is too much. 8 gets a 1. We need an 8. and 4 gets a 1. Right, and then the rest of them get 0, right? So it should be 32 plus 8 plus 4. So 32 plus 8 plus 4, that's 44. Perfect. Okay, so here's our new address. So it's going to be 0010100. Okay, that's our new address. So let me change this guy here. Copy this new address down here. Copy that guy. Put him there. Okay. Let's try that. Okay. I don't want it to have, the reason why I chose another host address is because I don't want it to be the exact same scenario from the last example. You know, plus you might get a question like, hey, what's the network number for this guy? Or what network is this a part of? Because you saw that the first number, the .15, it's a part of the 192.168.1.0 network, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a 44 is going to be a part of the same network. So we want to figure that out. You might get a question like that when it comes to subnetting. Like, you get a question like, is this, what part of what network is this a part of? Or is this a usable address? Or is it a broadcast address? Or is it a network definition address? Like, you know. So let's do it. Let's do it on this guy. So we have the first one's going to be false. The next one's going to be false. The next one's going to be true. Right? Because we have a 1 and a 1, so that's true. The next one's false. Everything else is false after that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. We have some kind of a difference, right? So now we know that something's going to change, right? So, okay, so what's the IP address for this guy? The IP address for this guy was, oh, what's the network address for this, right? So the network address for this is a 1, right? So we know that, oh, crap, I'm doing this. Okay, so this stays the same, this stays the same, this stays the same, but then we have a 1 here, and what place is that at? So we have the 0, 0, and a 1. So guess what? Our new network is .32. Alright, so this is now the network address, believe it or not, in the /27, a /27 with this IP address and this subnet mask, the same, remember this net mask and this IP and this slash, same thing. So if it's a .44, it's no longer part of the .0 network. Now it's part of the .32 network, right? Why? Because there's a 0 in this place. There's a 0. Yeah, I input the address here. There's a 0, 0, 1, 0. This is a 0. This is a 0. The rest of them are 0. So it's a 32. So yeah, this is your new network address. Pretty much, right? So now you know, what does that mean? Okay, so let's figure out, you know, what would be the broadcast address for this network. So let's figure out what the next network is going to be. Okay, so here's what we do. We say, well, we look at this net mask and we say, well, what was the last bit that we borrowed? It's this guy right here, right? This is the very last bit, and this is like the key. All right, and this last bit is something called the magic number. All right, this is like super important. Knowing this number, getting it from the net mask and how many bits, it doesn't matter if it's in this octet or if you end up, let's say these were all from here on out. I don't want to highlight everything. Okay, let's say that much. Let's say after this one, everything else was a 0, right? You still count this last one, all right, and what place it's at, and you get that magic number, right? It doesn't matter what octet it's in. In this case, we're in the last octet, and the last bit that's a 1 that's turned on is this one. What place is it on? Is it in the 128? No. Is it in the 64? No. It's in the 32's place, right? What does that mean? Let me tell you what that means. That means that our networks go up in increments of 32, right? And we'll do this on this page, okay? So what's our first network address? Our first network address was 192.168.100, right? The next network, like after that, the next network that you have available is 192.168.1.32. That's the next network. All right, you're starting to subnet this thing now. This is what's happening now. What's the network? What's 32 hosts after that? All right, so let's say 32 plus 32, that's 64. So the next network is 192.168.1.64, right? Add another 32. What's 32 after that? 96. The next network is one. Look at that, just by the magic number, right? 192.168.1.96. That's your your next network. All right. This is now we're subnetting here, right? So this is your net network. So now what can we tell, right? So we can tell that this IP address, the 44 right here, this 192.168.1.44, it falls under what network? This network, right? Because the network starts here. Hey, what's your broadcast address? So right here we have, put this guy down one. This is our networks, right? And then right here I'm gonna put broadcast address. All right. So when you're subnetting, okay, so before our broadcast address was 255 because we're counting it as a single network, you know, when it was a class C or /24, but now we're subnetting it, you know. So now it's like, oh, so what's the next, what's the broadcast address? Well, it's the last address before the start of the new network. So the broadcast address for this network, for the 192.168.1.0 network, when you're subnetting, it's going to be 192.168.1.31. Okay. This is now the broadcast. When you're subnetting, this is now the broadcast of this network. All right, and then the next network starts right here. Well, what's the broadcast address of that network? Obviously, it's going to be the one right before this one. So it's going to be 192.168.1.63. All right, what about this guy? This guy is going to be, you can follow along now. Now you know what's going on. 192.168.1.95. All right, and then what's the broadcast after that one? So let me just add 32. So 128 is the next one. So the broadcast address for the next one is going to be 127. So 192.168.1.27. All right. Phew. Okay, so now we know that when it's a /27, not a /24, but a /27, each network is going to have 32 hosts, right? So each one of these networks can hold 32 hosts total, but it can only hold how many? 30 usable hosts, right? Because the first address is going to be the network, and then the last one's going to be the broadcast. So everything between the .0 and the .31 is going to be addresses that you can hand out to other devices and stuff, routers, laptops, whatever, you know. But now we're getting information from just this magic number, right? So this is very, very important. I'm literally going to finish up here so you can digest just this part, okay? All right. So this magic number, the last bit you borrow on the network, on the net mask. So 128, 64, 32. All right, you have 32. So the magic number here is 32. All right, and it tells you that how many addresses are contained within the network. How many hosts are in the network per network. All right, so 32 is your magic number there, because it was the last one we borrowed. It's in the 32's place. All right, even if it was in this octet, let's say this one was a 1 here. Let's say the ones, all these are 1s, and the last one was here, and then the rest of these were zeros. It was still in 32. It would still be in the 32's place, but obviously you would get a lot more hosts, right? It'd be like 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 to the 2, 2 to the 3, 2 to the 4, 2 to the 5 hosts that you can have, let's say. But per address, it would be 32. So, right? Because you can even check it right here. Look, so these are your hosts, right? Right. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you say 2 to the 5th power. And 2 to the 5th power, I just did the math on my phone calculator, is 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. And then you just double check. We got the same answer, but we didn't have to do the math. We just checked the last bar. We didn't have to do the 2 to the 5th. You know what I mean? We only did this part right here. Right? How many networks can you have? Well, let's see. 2 to the 3rd, 2 to the 3. So you can break this up into 3 networks, right? So it's going to be the last octet right here. It's going to be 3. So 2 to the 3 is 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8. You can break this up into 8 networks. Alright, you got all this information just from the magic number, okay? So by these bits. So right here are your hosts. And right here are your network from the last octet where the 1 stopped. Okay, so the very last octet, and I don't mean this octet, I mean wherever the 1 stopped, that octet. Okay, that's what I mean. So in this case, here is your host. So your host is going to be, it's the same thing as saying whatever it is, it's going to be 2 to the power of however many hosts there are, right? And then you remember that wherever the 1 stopped, everything after that, all the zeros, these are spaces for your hosts, right? So 2 to the however many zeros there are, or the magic number, right, which is 32. So 2 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's 32. How many networks can you have here on the /27 for this? You can have 1, 2, 3. So it's going to be 2 to the n, or 2 however many network bits there are in that octet. So right here it's 3. So 2 to the 3 is 8. So you can break. So here's network 1, network 2, 3, 4. Hell, I'm going to finish this up. All right, let's finish this guy up. This is supposed to be 127. Yeah. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 168.1.128. Alright, and then let's do 128 plus 32. 160 is our next one. 192.168.1.160. What's our next network? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need 2 more. So plus 32. 192.168.1.192. 1 more. Plus 32 more. 192.168.1.224. Alright, and then right here the net mask, not the net mask, the broadcast address for this guy is going to be 192.168.1.159 because it's 1 right before the start of the next network, or the next network. This guy's going to be 192.168.1.191. Okay, let's go here. 192.168.1.223. And for this guy, it's going to be 192.168.1. I'm going to do plus 32, but it doesn't count, right? It's going to be 32, 255. 255, right? Because what happens after 255? Let's say another network, now it's no longer a /27, but let's say you were to go after that. After 255, this guy will go up by 1, right? So the next network after that, let's say, but it would no longer be a /27, right? It would no longer be, it would no longer have this net mask of 255.255.255.224 or a /27. It would be a /28 most likely, right? Wait, /28? No, /26. It would be a /26. So the next address would be, the next network would be 192.168.2.0, right? Because 255, nothing comes after that. So this guy goes to 2, and then it starts over at 0. And then you would have to do this all over. But now this would be, this next network would fall under the /26. So I'm not going to write it, but you get what I'm saying, right? So now you have you have all this information now, right? So now you have all these IP addresses, you have the network address, you have broadcast address for all these guys. You know how many hosts are in each one of these networks, how many usable. There's 32 hosts per network. Only 30 of those are usable. You know where one starts, and the one right before the next network is where it ends. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 networks that you can break this. You can break this /27 into 8 networks. Okay. If they give you some random IP address, let's say they give you and it's still a /27, they say something like, oh, 192.168.1.64. What network does that fall on? Well, it's a .64, so let's look at where we're at. 64. And they'll say something like, look, by coincidence, so I didn't even think about it. And they'll be like, is this a usable IP address? Right? Is a .64 at the end of this usable? And you'll say, well, let's see. Oh, look. Here's my network definer. Here's the start of the network, 192.168.64. No, it's not a usable address because this address is a network address. It's not a host address. So you would say, no, if it was a .65, or let's say it's a .70, right? Let's say they tell you 192.168.1.70. What network does it fall on, right? And is it usable? All right, so it's a .70. So let's see here, 64. Oh, it falls in between this network and this network, right? So the .70, so it's a part of this network, right? Because it goes from 64 to 95, right? The first one and the last one not being usable, so it lands in between here before this network. So 192.168.1.70 is part of the 192.168.1.64 network, right? It's part of this network, and it is a usable address because it's not the first address and it's not the last address. It falls right in between here, right? The .70. I just put that there. Say right. So yeah, so that's now you're subnetting, and now you can answer questions about subnets. You just subnetted this into 8 networks because you know that you needed it. Later on in the next video, this is going to be it for today, I promise. I'm just going to stop because I could keep talking about this, but I want you to like check this video out, watch it again if you need to, and just get that much. All right, digest this information, you know, like really let it sink in what I just told you about this part, how you can get the network, what network this address belongs to, and the magic number part, right? Being this last borrowed bit, the last bit that's a 1 before the 0 start, what place it's in, right? And having that be the magic number, and how much information this number tells you, right? It tells you the hosts, so it's 32 hosts because 2 to the 5th, because there's 5 zeros for the host, is 32. And it tells you also, like this part, it tells you how many networks it can be, 2 to the 1, 2, 3, so it could be 8 networks. This can be split up into 8 networks, and here are the networks, and here are the addresses because they go up by 32, 0, 32, plus 32 is 64, plus 32 is 96, and so on, right? And then you can get the broadcast address from that, and you can tell which addresses fall into which networks, and which are usable addresses and which ones are not, because they'll try to trick you. They'll give you this address, and they'll be like, oh, is this address a usable address? No, it's a broadcast address. Or this address, no, because that's a network address. Or this address, no, that's another broadcast address. And so on and so on. So I'm going to just put this here. I'm going to let that sit there for a second. Take a picture of it. Do this right here. Grab your snippet tool. Hit new. You know, do this kind of thing. And just take a snapshot of that. Save it wherever, you know. Save it somewhere. No, I don't want to. But you know, just let that sink in for a second, like this what we just did. Watch the video over if you need to. On the next video, I'm going to run through examples when they start telling you like, oh, well, the admin department needs 32 hosts. This other department needs 47 hosts. This other like sales department needs 340 hosts. This other department needs 1,000 hosts. What slash network do we want to give? You know. And the lower you go in the slashes, the more room you open up, right? Because that means less of these are turned on for network. Let's say this is a slash. I don't like how this thing highlights wherever. Highlight what I want you to highlight. There we go. Let's say it's this much. So you have a slash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is the, let's say you have a slash 11 network, right? So all of these would be zeros, right? So how many, let's say the biggest hosts, let's say the biggest department wants 1,000 hosts. So now you have to do you can do 2 to the whatever many number of zeros right here, and you can find out where you can start subnetting. And you can start from there and break them up into all of these and give them all, you know what I mean? Okay, so I'm going to let this sit here for a second too. You know, take a snapshot of that. You know, just kind of let it sink in. These networks, how we got the broadcasts, which ones are usable, which ones are not. Remember, not the first one and not the last one, before the start of the new network. And remember that this is how Cisco Router figures out what network your address is a part of by using logic, right? Truth tables, the AND-ing. So it ANDs the IP address binary and the net mask binary together, like top to bottom, gets your network number, and you can do that too, and it's easier than doing the math for it, because you can just multiply these two, I think, to get the same, but I didn't learn it that way because this is just easier. Alright. Oh, this was for a, sorry, this is for a /24 broadcast. For a .32 network, this broadcast is 163. So, wait, I'm tripping. Just 63. So here's my broadcast for this network. There we go. Alright, so take another snapshot of that because I just corrected something. My bad. Alright. So I'll go this far right now to let this part sink in. And then on the next one, I'll show you some examples from one of the Subnet Challenges website, and I'll work one of the problems out so you can see how you can use this to subnet whatever you want. Okay, and that's how you subnet. Alright, so that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ernesto Vasquez, aka Grizzly. That's what everybody calls me, by the way. Not you guys, but like everybody else. But yeah, so this video was for www.cybertitans.org, and this is subnetting part 2. Alright, peace.